Hey guys, you're listening to episode 59 of the School of Intuition Soundcast, and I'm Natasha Che. This soundcast is a self-realization training for the empathic badass, and my goal here is to help you master the tools that allows you to walk on this planet with power and grace as an empathic light being. And today I want to talk about how to follow your intuition when you have conflicting desires or conflicting needs. And this is in response to some of the feedback that I got on a previous episode that I published right after the New Year, where I talked about my New Year's resolution, which is that is episode 57. And my New Year's resolution is essentially a contract that I sign up for, a contract with the universe. And the contract says, I actually wrote it down here because I look at this often to remind me of my contract, okay? So the contract says, I, Natasha Che, I am committed to only doing things that I feel inspired to take action on, as conveyed to me through my authentic desires, my intuition, and my inner knowing, with no questions asked, even when the purpose of the action is not revealed to me or makes no sense to my logical mind. And this commitment also means that I am going to take absolutely no action on things that I do not feel called to do. So that is my New Year's resolution, and I'm going to, this contract is effective for the next 12 months. So I talked about this contract in episode 57, and I got some emails from the listeners of this soundcast sharing with me some of your New Year's resolutions as well, and some of them are very beautiful. For example, Marie said in her email that what I'm learning to do this year is to let my heart say, here's what we are going to do, and then let my mind work on making it happen, rather than letting my mind dictate and command and keeping my heart out of it entirely. So this year, my heart and mind are learning teamwork, and that is inspiring work for me. That is so beautiful and so well said. I just want to share it with you because I was really moved by what she said. And some of you also, had sort of a different opinion from the sentiment that I expressed in episode 57, for example. Okay, I got some questions which I will paraphrase here. One person said, it's like following your intuition, following your inspiration, it's all well and good. However, you need discipline and willpower to succeed at anything. If Thomas Edison didn't keep going when his 10,000 light bulb experiments failed, we will still be using oil lamps by now. Okay? And also someone else said, how do you differentiate following your intuition, following your inspirations from letting your impulse rule the day and being irresponsible? Well, very good questions. So, and also another person said something related to, sometimes it's just really hard to tell what is actually your real inspiration. What do I really mean by authentic desires and intuitions? So that is actually a long-running topic. It's pretty much the theme of the entire soundcast. So I think if that is, you have that question on your mind, it's probably useful to go back and listen to some of the past episodes. But anyway, so in this episode, I feel like, I feel like I'm being called to sort out some of these questions. Okay. So there are a couple things that I want to tell you, and then I'm going to tell you, come back to the topic of this episode, how to follow your intuition when you have inner conflicts. Okay. But first of all, a couple points. The first thing I want to tell you is, following your inspiration is not equal to letting yourself go. It cannot be farther away from that. Okay. It's not about, just like, let's forget about anything else. Forget about, reasons, forget about responsibility. Let's just let loose and follow the whim of the moment. That is absolutely not what I meant. Okay. Because I totally agree, with this one person said, you need discipline and willpower in a lot of situations in life. That's how you move ahead, is through discipline and willpower in many situations. And actually follow your inspiration, at least to me, it takes discipline, because it's actually not that easy to do. I'm not talking about, following your inner child's command in, doing things on a whim. And there is, though sometimes that can be your authentic inspiration at the moment. But your inspiration, your intuition, it comes from a much more integrated place. And sometimes I have trouble articulate this in words to people. But if you go back to listen to episode 57, I actually talked about this. It's not easy to follow your inspiration because we get influenced and affected by so many factors in our life. We have so many thoughts and feelings at every moment. And we have our personal history, our personal stories, our education and upbringings, and all those things, they're exercising influence on you at every moment. And many of those influences, they're long-standing trends. They are the way to do things. They are the status quo in your life. And in order to fight through all that noise, to follow what is true and authentic to your own true self, that requires courage and discernment, and a lot of times discipline. Okay? Because as we walk through this human life, we accumulate a lot of habits of doing things that may not be to your highest good. But for whatever reason, that is our way to do things. I will talk about this a little more later, okay? And in order to change that way to do things, because follow your authentic inspiration, a part of it means you cannot just go through life following your existing habit, your current habit of doing things. I'll give you an example. Something happened this past week. So on Soundwise, we've had an increasing number of publisher cancellations. So people open a publisher account and they played around for 20 minutes and decided, this is not for me. And they canceled their account. So we've had a sort of like a upward trend of this type of cases in January, this month. Okay. Last month, actually. We're already in February. Okay. So, and I noticed this and my mind started going, wait a minute, we need to do something about this. Something's not going on right here. Why are people canceling? Maybe this, you need to go talk to people. You need to find out, what do people really want? Why are they canceling? Which part of this is not working? And blah, 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 blah. Okay? And many of the things that I was thinking, if you look at it at face value, they are valid. these thoughts that I was having, they have a good point. And more importantly, I was getting worried. I was really worried that, people don't like my product, right? But I noticed I was getting this very tense feeling in my stomach. Yeah. And then I sit down and I ask myself, okay, go back to your contract. What is your contract, Natasha Che, for this year? I'm committed to only doing things that I feel inspired to take action on. So I ask myself, okay, despite all my frustrated feelings and my different thoughts about this, I ask myself, do you feel inspired to take any action on this? And if so, what are the actions? And when I really, get quiet with myself and I feel into the truth of the situation and I realize, you know what? I do not feel called to take any immediate action on this right now. And why? I cannot tell you why. I have guesses. Either because, at this stage, the product focus needs to be elsewhere and there are higher priorities that I need to sort out. And so I feel called to take actions on these other things. But at that moment, I realized I actually do not feel called to do something about this particular issue. Even though my mind was going on and on and on about how bad this is, how much urgent this is, and how I really need to find a way to solve this problem because it is a big problem. So, why I'm telling you about this? Because that is a moment when I realize I need to employ and apply the good old discipline in this situation. If I listen to my mind, I will go about running around and doing a bunch of things to try to fix this anxiety that I have about people canceling their account. But if I really I'm committed to following my contract with the universe, that's not a course of action that I should take. And it takes discipline to say to myself, Natasha Che, what you need to do here is follow your contract. Your contract says if this is not something you feel called to take action on, you are going to absolutely take no action on it with no questions asked. So it took discipline on my part to say, whatever the reason that is, I do not feel called to take action on this thing that's giving me anxiety. So I am going to drop this case right now. I'm going to drop this case. I'm going to stop allowing it to take up emotional, energetics, real estate in my being, and go focus on the things that I feel called to take action on right now. And that, my friend, takes discipline. So my point of telling you this is an example of, what I mean by following your inspiration is not just the whim of the minute. Discipline is a tool in your toolbox of human mastery. And it's better not be the only tool there in the toolbox. But, there's nothing wrong with discipline. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. It's a beautiful tool. So is spontaneity. So is planning. So is doing things without plan. Those tools have situations where they are called for. But you cannot have only one tool in the toolbox. And who at the end of the day decides? What is the most effective way to actually decide which tool of yours actually apply in a particular situation? And what I want to tell you is, if you follow your authentic inspiration, you will know what tool is called for at this particular moment. As opposed to, there are many people in the world, actually I would say this is the majority of the earth population, is we tend to apply we tend to use the tools that we are especially good at, right? It's just human nature. If you're good at something, you tend to use it more, right? So my mom used to, when I was little, my mom liked this herb. It's some kind of Chinese herb. It's close to mint or something, and she uses that whenever I got sick, no matter what the cause of the illness is. I could get a cold. I could get a stomach flu or whatever. She will use that same medicine on me every time, because that's what she knows. And that's what every one of us do to a certain extent. If you're a very disciplined person, if you're very good at discipline, you tend to use that on everything. When a relationship is way past its expiration day, you still hear people say, well, if we just sit down and stay the course and work through this with willpower and goodwill, we are going to get through this. Or you have people who are very good at sadness. That is the emotion they're very good at. Then whenever there's something negative comes up, their emotional response is sadness. And you have people who do not do sadness at all. And when a situation that calls for being sad, they will go do something else. They will come up with some their own way to respond to the situation in order to not be sad. And there are people who are funny. They think that humor will solve everything. They apply humor to every situation. So you get my point. Okay? If we are particularly good at a tool, we tend to use it more often. Doesn't mean it's always appropriate. However, if you get good at following your authentic inspiration, following your intuition, you will know what is the best tool to apply to a certain situation. And if you are not so good at a tool, you will feel called to get better at it. For example, I recently feel called to take a lot of dance classes because, now first of all, to be honest, I don't know why it is the case. I can only tell you my guesses, because intuition doesn't answer the question why, usually until much later. But my guess is, as consciousness expands, I need to get even more grounded into my body. And that's why I feel called to take a lot of dance lessons and also, do a lot of workouts and physical exercises. And I will tell you something related to my dance class. That's related to the second point that I want to tell you, okay? And my second point that I want to tell you today is, if you think about what essentially is your intuition. So let's take this word. Think about this word for a minute. When I tell people, okay, I follow my intuition, what does that really mean? And to me, intuition is this supercomputer. Okay? It's this supercomputer in you that arrives at a decision based on very complex algorithms and a gazillion input factors. And most of those you're not even consciously aware of. So it's totally impossible, actually, for your mind to come to the solution, come to a decision in the same way, because your mind does not have access to much of the input that your intuition has. So imagine your intuition is this really supercomputer. It takes into account to arrive at the decision. It takes into account all sorts of factors. It takes into account your history, your preferences, what do you need at this moment. It takes into account your future, which you actually have access to. You have access to that information, though mostly not consciously. Takes into account your future, takes into account your soul contract, your life purpose. What is the most beneficial to your learning journey, to your growth journey of your soul? What are your soul contract with other people? All these different factors it takes into account in order to arrive at a decision. And that decision, we call it something that you feel called to do. That's why, because it's so complex, a lot of times you will feel like, okay, I know this is the right thing to do, but I cannot tell you why. Because if something, you can only, give a reason about something if it's relatively simple. Actually, human language is only, capable of explaining a relatively simple logic and reasonings. That we usually don't think about this way, right? Language is quite expressive. You usually have no problem expressing your ideas and emotions, and that sounds pretty sufficient in most cases. But if you compare that, how much you can explain in language, you compare that to the amount of data and information that your intuition uses to process to arrive at a decision, a so-called inspiration, that is not even comparable. Okay? So I'll give you an example from my dance class. So I was at this dance class last week. It was a salsa lesson. So my instructor was teaching me how to do this 2 turns in a row. I forgot what's the, Spanish name for it. It sounds very good. I couldn't remember. So in any case, I needed to do this 2 turns in a row. Well, my instructor, was holding my arms, like helping me through this turn. So my instructor asked me, like, are you left-handed or right-handed? So I'm right-handed, right? So we started doing the left turn, which uses the right hand first, because he thought that would be easier because I'm used to my right hand more. And he explained how to do the turn. And I followed him to, he showed me how to do it, and I followed him step by step. And then he asked me to do it myself, and I couldn't. And then I did it, but did it like super awkwardly. And the whole time my mind was trying to remember, okay, what did he do? What did he do? What did he tell me? What was the next step? Because, body coordination, dance is like a very, very complex process. There are all sorts of coordination involved, right? So if you're new to this, if you're new to a move, and my mind was trying to grasp all this multi-dimensional information and try to make my body execute this at the same time with my hands and feet and my, whatever. So I was having a hard time. My mind was having a hard time just even trying to remember what was the right move, because my mind operates in a linear way. Okay? And my instructor said, okay, well, how about we try your left hand? So we tried my left hand, we tried a right turn, which is turning the other way. And it uses my left hand. And lo and behold, I did it perfectly. And my instructor was floored, and he's like, how did you do that? You didn't even practice. You didn't even practice this side. And then it dawned on me, you know what? I did better on my left hand because that's not my dominant hand. My dominant hand on my right side is like tightly controlled by my mind. Okay, that's why it's dominant. And my left hand, the left side also is linked to the right brain, right? It's the nonlinear part, the more creative part. It follows a much less rigid process. In other words, it kind of takes cues from this supercomputer that I call intuition. So it turned out to be much better. Though after I did the turn, I cannot tell you for the life of me what I actually did. I could do it. If I asked me to do it again, I could do it again. But if you ask me, now Natasha, break it down for me. Tell me what was the first step you took and what was the second, and then what did you do? I could not. Because the information was not processed in a conscious linear way. But I got the job done much better. Okay, so that is what I mean. What I meant to tell you is, this is a process that's so complex, and a lot of times your mind cannot explain. It's much beyond its grasp, and it's a way of doing things that your mind is totally not used to. Okay, so which brings me to the third point I want to tell you today is, when you have conflicting needs and conflicting desires, essentially they are just different pieces of input of information that you feed into this supercomputer. You do not need to tell your supercomputer what to do. You do not need to tell your computer, okay, here's a step 1, here's step 2, process the information this way. There's no need. Okay? Your supercomputer will figure out the thing. Will configure all this information and arrive at what is being called for at this particular moment. And sometimes you've just got to trust that. So that's what I want to tell you. The third point is, when you have conflicting needs, for example, I love watching Game of Thrones. I know the new season is going to be this April. It's coming out this April. It's last season. I can tell you for sure I'm going to binge watch it. Okay? Although, at the same time, I also need sleep. Right? The next day morning, I need to wake up still as a functional human being. I've got to do other things in my life. So, and this has happened before. So I was binge watching some show. And then this question arises. Is this the right time to go to bed, or should I continue watching the show? That is a decision point, right? So if you apply your mind will tell you, if you have like a super smart mind, your mind will tell you, okay, let's calculate what is the marginal benefit of keep sitting here and watch the show, and what is the marginal cost of not going to bed. And you need to balance this benefit and cost. So that's how the mind works, right? Doing this calculation. However, the actual decision, the appropriate decision, it needs so many more. It requires a lot more input than that. Right? So your mind can only process limited amount of information in a relatively linear way. But that's your intuition works in a different way. So the way, if I were to make a decision in that situation based on my intuition, is very simple. If the question arises, okay, hey, Natasha, is this the right time to go to bed? I will go to bed. Now, first of all, that question in itself is an inspiration, my friend. That question does not arise out of the blue. Okay? Whenever you have a question that kind of, hints at you that maybe a different course of action is called for, that in itself is an inspiration, right? So, and if I operate from the space of my intuition, then decision is very simple. Okay, should I go to bed or should I keep watching? Well, the answer is whatever is called for at this moment. What do you feel like it's the right decision at this moment? And I do whatever that comes up. It's that simple. There's no analysis, no calculation involved. Because, again, your supercomputer is doing all that calculation behind the scenes, below the surface of your conscious awareness. Now, I know some of you are thinking, okay, well, how exactly am I going to do it? How do I know? I mean, if I don't know how this decision is made, how am I going to know? And I'm sorry if you keep asking that question. It's like I understand where that question comes from, and that question comes from your mind. And it's totally justified and totally legit question for your mind to ask. But I'm sorry that I cannot give you an answer to that question. I don't know how to explain that how your complex supercomputer works. But I can give you something more practical, okay? I give you something more practical is, what do you do when you have these conflicting needs, okay? Your body wants something, your mind wants something, your emotion wants something, your inner child wants something, your inner adult, whatever, wants something else. What do you do? Very, very simple response. Ask yourself, what is the calling right now? At this moment. Not like in 20 minutes. Not in half a day, not in a month, but what do I feel called to execute on at this particular moment? Just narrow it down so that it's not as overwhelming. And when something comes up, trust it and actually take action on the direction that you got. And that, to most people, is the hard part. Is because you don't know how you come up with that decision. Most of us, it's like, okay, am I making this up? Maybe it's just random. Maybe it's, I don't know. But since I don't know how this decision is being arrived at, how can I even trust it? And what I'm telling you is, that's exactly why you need to trust it. Because the more you trust this answer that you get for in real decision making, the better quality decisions that you arrive at. Because your supercomputer, these algorithms, they need input. They need data. They need to be put in realistic situations in order to calibrate the algorithm. That's the, best analogy that I can give you is they need real data as input. And something needs to be on the line. It cannot be a hypothetical scenario. Okay? There has to be something of consequence. So you need to actually apply this approach to direct your actual decision making. And the more you do this, the more your algorithms calibrate, the better you are at this. And that's how you make relatively effortless decisions with your intuition. even when you have conflicting needs and conflicting desires. They may seem in conflict. All those needs can be totally valid on their own, but there is a action that's being called for at one particular moment that takes into account all these considerations but arrive at some sort of priority actions. Does that make sense? Anyway, I hope this is of use to your own decision making, okay? I hope this clarifies some of the questions that you may have after you listen to episode 57. And if you have not listened to it, I recommend you go back to listen to episode 57, where I talked about my New Year's resolution, this commitment to taking action 100% on my inspirations. In any case, I want to thank you for listening to this soundcast and having this soundcast as part of your weekly routine. If you have not joined the Empathic Badass Tribe, you can go to natashache.com/school to join us there. Okay, I will talk to you next time.